What is the Bard class like in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? What's it all about? And how bard is it to hard? No, wait. How hard is bard? No, how bard is... Oh, for the love... This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video chapter, I'm continuing my series of detailed summaries of all the classes in Pathfinder 2e. This time we're going with the Master of Support, the Bard. We'll begin with a little summary of what the Bard is all about, and then I'll be looking at what makes it unique, followed by subclasses. After that, I'll go into class features as it levels up, then onto how the class feels to play, followed by a pros and cons list, a standout feats section, and I'll wrap things up with a rating of what the Bard is good and bad at, plus how complex it is to run. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please take a look in the description for links to my Ko-fi account, Patreon, or just hit like and or sub. I appreciate all the support you can give me. So let's sing a courageous anthem to start the music. Quickly, before I dive in, if you don't know what a spontaneous caster is versus a prepared caster, with the Bard being the former, I have a rather outdated video with that information linked on screen now with the timestamp for said explanation. But otherwise, okay, similarly to my last class summary video on the fighter, this Bard summary is going to be about the base class. You can always alter how your class functions with dedications and class archetypes and all the other stuff, but this is not going to mention any of that, just the vanilla class. So the Bard is an interesting class, as it's sometimes seen as like a bit of a joke. I mean, it's a person who in the middle of battlefield starts singing a tune or playing an instrument. What sort of class is that, really? But field musicians have existed for quite some time, drummers and fifers and pipers, etc. And so the Bard is kind of one of those, except with an extra touch of magic and a healthy dose of charm to go along with that. So basically the exact same as me. Oh, I mean, without the charm. Oh, and I guess the magic as well. So I guess I'm just weird and annoying then. This class is indeed a very support-oriented one. You're going to find a lot of your actions taken up using composition cantrips, and that may sound boring, but honestly, every other person in the group is going to be happy you're on the battlefield with them, whether they admit it or not. The Bard is an occult, spontaneous spellcaster class with 8 HP plus con. It's trained proficiency in light armor and unarmored defense, and it's trained with simple, martial, and unarmed attacks. Its key attribute is charisma. It's an expert in perception. It's trained in fortitude, reflex, and expert in will. It's trained in occultism, performance, and additional skills equal to 4+ your intelligence modifier, and it's trained in Bard class DC. And it's trained in spellcasting DCs and attack modifiers with 3 spell slots and cast per rank, ultimately with an extra rank 1 slot for your specific subclass spell, which we'll get to. With the summary out of the way, let's go into what makes the Bard special. So first of all, it gets composition cantrips, which are of course cantrips that tend to cost a single action. There's a bunch of different ones, but the main one you're going to be using is Courageous Anthem, which creates a 60-foot emanation around yourself, and that gives all allies a +1 status bonus to attack rolls, damage rolls, plus a +1 status bonus to saves against fear. Without certain feats, etc., you can only have one composition cantrip active at any given time. Speaking of composition cantrips, the feats to take them are pretty much all common, but the actual spells themselves are uncommon. I cannot see a good reason for this despite my online searching, so I must imagine this is for future-proofing or something. Doesn't make a difference to any of your selections, just thought I'd bring it up. When not casting composition cantrips, or while also casting composition cantrips, as they tend to be one action, you'll be casting spells or possibly even wading into battle with your allies, whether up close or at range. As a Bard's key attribute is charisma, they are generally going to be seen as the face of the party. And with the training in performance, they're the ones you're going to go to for any of your performing needs, whatever that may be. So while Bards may not be the tankiest of classes, they can survive a few hits with light armor proficiency, and they're trained in martial weapons so they can hit back a little bit too. They do tend to be pretty good with skills as well, with a little bit of extra training to be pumped into said skills at level 1. As for the subclasses for the Bard, they're called Muses, and each provides a Muse feat and a Muse spell. And at level 2, you can grab the Multifarious Muse to start grabbing feats from the other subclasses. First up is the Enigma Muse, which is all about uncovering the secrets of the universe. This Muse gives you the Bardic Lore feat, which is a lore skill that can be used to recall knowledge on any topic. And with it being a lore skill, that means the DC is lower by 2 effectively, which is pretty awesome. It does have some scaling issues, but it's pretty great most of the way through the game. You also get the Sure Strike Muse spell. Later, Enigma feats allow you to do things like use 5 recall knowledge actions for a single action, and even get extra spellcasting at level 16 and 18, which is lovely. The Maestro subclass is seen as an inspiration, confident in their performative abilities. They gain the Muse feat Lingering Composition, which allows you to, as a free action when you cast a composition cantrip, make a performance check. On a fail, nothing happens, but you don't lose a focus point, and on a success, you extend your composition by 3 3 rounds. On a crit success, it's 4 rounds, and at that point, it does cost a focus point. You also gain the Muse spell Soothe. Later feats allow you to enhance your composition cantrips and slash all their duration, such as allowing you to have 2 composition cantrips up at once with Harmonizer, or being able to increase the power of your Courageous Anthem, Rallying Anthem, or Song of Strength via the Fortissimo focus spell. A success here gives it a +2 instead of the +1, and a crit success gives it a +3 so long as you meet the DC, which can be pretty high, but it's still kind of amazing. The next Muse is the Polymath, which is meant to be a versatile jack of all trades, and it gets the Muse feat Versatile Performance, which allows you to use performance for making impression, demoralize, and impersonate, effectively replacing diplomacy, intimidation, and deception for those skill actions. You're also able to use your performance skill for prerequisites for feats for those 3 skills. I think this particular subclass is probably the skill monkey bard out of all of them, so if you love bananas and helping your allies, this is the one for you. Wait, that sounded really dodgy for a second. Later, Polymath feats mostly enhance your spellcasting, with Esoteric Polymath allowing you to learn spells and gain an extra spell slot for that particular spell. Eclectic Skill allows you to attempt skill checks without being trained in them. Impossible Polymath allows you to add spells to your Bard spellbook so long as you're trained in the relevant tradition, meaning you can kind of get 1 spell from every tradition, which is pretty amazing. And you get the Phantasmal Minion spell added to your list as part of the Polymath Muse. The Warrior Muse is all about wading into battle and fighting. You get the Martial Performance feat, which on a damaging strike extends the duration of your Courageous Anthem by 1 round. Later feats allow you to enhance your and your allies' strength with the Song of Strength, which gives a +1 status bonus for athletics checks for certain skill actions, as well as giving you things like Courageous Advance, which allows an ally to use a reaction to stride when you spend an action casting the Courageous Anthem composition cantrip. Warrior Muses also get Fear added to their spell list. Lastly, the Zoophonia Muse is all about harmonizing with nature, and you gain the Zoophonic Communication, which allows you to request from animals using performance instead of diplomacy, and you can use the same skill instead of nature to command an animal. Later feats allow you to further enhance your natural abilities, such as being able to snarl for an action using a nature performance check to make multiple creatures potentially frightened. You can also get musical summons at 14 to be able to summon an animal and use a composition cantrip for 3 actions rather than 4, and Zoophonia Muses gain the Summon Animal spell. With the subclasses out of the way, let's go into post-level 1 class features. At level 3, your reflex saves increase to expert and you gain signature spells, allowing you to pick 1 spell per rank to freely heighten. At 7th level, your proficiency for spell attack modifiers and DCs increases to expert. At 9th, your fortitude saves increase to expert and your will saves increase to master, and whenever you get a success on said roll, it's a crit success. At level 11, you become an expert with martial, simple, and unarmed attacks, so whenever you crit while one of your compositions is active, you gain the critical specialization effect. Your perception also increases to master at the same level. At 13, your unarmored and light armor expertise increases to expert, and you gain weapon specialization, dealing 2 additional damage with weapon and armored attacks, which goes to 3 when you're a master with these weapon types and 4 when you're legendary. At level 15, your proficiency ranks for spell attack modifiers and DCs increase to master. At 17, your proficiency for will saves goes to legendary, and when you roll a crit fail, you get a fail instead, and when you get a fail with a will save, you take only half damage. At level 19, you become legendary with spell attack modifiers and spell DCs, and to top off your class features, you gain Magnum Opus, which gives you 2 common 10th rank occult spells added to your repertoire, and you get a single 10th rank spell slot. So if you're looking to play a mostly support-oriented spellcaster with little potential for martial abilities in there, Bard is absolutely fantastic at that. They always say every +1 matters in PF2E, and it's incredibly true, and the Bard is the prime and perfect example of why that's the case. But what's it actually feel like to play this class? Well, before I jump in here, first of all, I hope you have a GM who likes calling out when things crit or miss or even hit because of +1s and -1s, etc. Because if you do, you are in for a bit of a treat. And that's because the Bard is all about those +1s. There are so many times in sessions when players miss enemies by 1 or miss a crit by 1, and I always call it out because I know that if there's a Bard in play or someone with Bless or whatever, they are really going to appreciate that knowledge. And if you have that knowledge, you are going to feel like you are positively affecting the whole party quite consistently. On top of that, you're going to feel like you can deal a decent amount of damage with your occult spell list, which tends to do some solid damage over time effects and a couple of straight up damaging effects also. You're going to feel like you can debuff enemies pretty consistently and rather well, and really get the best out of your allies with those debuffs. So you're not going to feel too squishy, but you're not going to feel particularly tanky either. You can survive a couple of hits, maybe even a crit or 2 before you go down, especially as Bard doesn't get shield blocked by default. But hey, you can probably heal yourself. You'll find that most turns you're going to be spending an action action using one of your composition cantrips, and as you level, you get to pick from different ones. Generally speaking, though, Courageous Anthem is almost always going to be on top, though Dirge of Doom is a fantastic choice as well, but we'll get to that. Sometimes it feels as though your action economy is rather limited because of these composition cantrips, which is honestly why I personally think the Maestro Bard is probably the best muse in the system. Even if you just grab it with the Multifarious Muse class feat I mentioned earlier, it does mean that you can do performance check and increase your Courageous Anthem to 3 rounds, which is honestly gonna help a lot. The Warrior Muse is pretty good as well, but I think Maestro is just a little bit better. That's my personal opinion though. Without those two muses, you're gonna feel somewhat starved for actions between turns. I mean, I guess that is kind of part of the beauty of PF2E. Everyone wants more actions, but some classes sometimes feel like they need a few more than others, and Bard is one of them. Most of your feat choices are gonna be either extra composition cantrips or even stuff like Hymn of Healing, which allows you to heal over time. There's a lot of feats in here that tend to be spellcaster focused, which makes sense as Bard in PF2E is a full spellcaster, but you can get things like Reach Spell and Quicken Casting, etc. Ultimately, you are going to be and feel like a support character, and you're going to be positively impacting the battlefield with said support, so long as your GM lets you know what you're doing. While technically you could try to not play as a support class, you'd be better off playing as something like an Occult Sorcerer if that was the case, because the Bard really is all about supporting themselves and allies, and they are fantastic at that. If that's the sort of class you like playing and the sort of role it's something that interests you, then Bard is definitely going to be very enjoyable for you. Right, onto the pros and cons. First, the pros. Bards are amazing at support. I've already mentioned this about 10 times already. This class is all about support and it's fantastic at it. Possibly the best in the whole system. You are the face of the party. The Bard is all about charisma and performance and all those sorts of things. So get that diplomacy skill jacked up with this particular class because you're going to be the face of the party and the rest of your group is either going to love you for it or hate you for it. Probably the former, I hope. You are an amazing helper. Those composition cantrips feel varied, so you feel like, especially as you level, there's a bunch of different things you can do each turn to support your entire party. It doesn't always have to be Courageous Anthem, and it feels nice to have that variety in there. You're always going to feel like you're doing something to help the party with just a single action every turn. Good spellcasting. The Bard gets a decent amount of spell slots, and the Occult tradition has a lot of debuffing, damage over time, and weird mind-altering esoteric stuff in there. You're going to feel quite effective at those tasks, and you also get to heal a little bit as well. Variety. Sometimes you'll be dealing damage, sometimes you'll be debuffing, sometimes you'll be healing, sometimes you'll be stabbing people in the face with a sword. The Bard can do some varied roles in the party. They don't excel at being a jack of all trades, but they can do it, which is nice if you like to keep things different each round. On to the cons. That action economy. Those composition cantrips can eat up an action every single turn, and that can sometimes feel quite limiting and rather annoying when other classes don't have action limitations like that. At least some of them don't. Support heavy. If support classes do not interest you, then this class is a complete waste of time for you to play. You really have to be the type of person who likes supporting party members to enjoy the Bard. That maths can be tricky. If you don't understand the system to know enough of how much of a difference you're making on the battlefield with your +1s and -1s and all that stuff, then you're not really going to understand how much you're doing with your class. You really need to understand how the maths works within PF2E to enjoy this class properly. You don't need to be an expert, you just need to roughly understand it, and your GM needs to tell you. Charisma, charisma, charisma. If you do not like being a charismatic player character, then you're going to struggle with the Bard. I maintain that there's lots of different ways to play a Bard. You don't have to make it a musician, you don't even have to make it good at talking. Maybe you're just really attractive or whatever, and that in itself is charisma. But if you don't like any of that, then you may struggle to enjoy this class because you're really going to want to utilize the whole charisma theme. Mixed subclasses. I honestly think that the Enigma, Maestro, and Polymath are the best muses in the system, with the Warrior and Zuphonia being pretty terrible, quite frankly. That is my personal opinion. I just don't really see the point in playing either of those. You can pick up the other subclass options with the Multifarious Muses I've said before, but it's a shame that the Bard has some subclass options that feel kind of rubbish. Right, so let's take a look at some interesting feats for the Bard. Like my fighter video, I'm just going to be taking a look at some of the feats throughout the levels, starting at low level and going high level, and it's going to be feats that I think sound cool, the ones that stood out to me, and are not going to be anything to do with any subclasses. Hymn of Healing gives you the Hymn of Healing focus spell, which is 2 actions. It gives yourself or an ally fast healing 2, which is 2 health per round. You also get 2 temporary hit points when you first cast this and sustain it. It scales pretty well, an extra 2 hit points and temp health per rank, which is pretty fantastic. I've already mentioned the Multifarious Muse multiple times, absolutely worth taking to grab a couple more Muse feats. The Melodious Melodious Spell Feat allows you to spend an extra action making your next spell subtle, meaning you can cast it secretly without people seeing you cast a spell. The Triple Time Feat gives you triple time composition cantrip, which is a 60-foot emanation, lasts around. It gives yourself and your allies a plus 10-foot status bonus to all speeds. The Dirge of Doom composition cantrip, which is an emanation, lasts around and makes enemies within the area frightened 1. That's a 30-foot emanation. They're unable to reduce that frightened value below 1 while they remain in the area. There is no save for this spell. It's not even a focus spell, it's just a composition cantrip. It's incredibly strong, making everyone frightened 1, lowers all the stats by 1, including the saves, which is great for spellcasters. An amazing composition cantrip. The House of Imaginary Walls gives you the same named composition cantrip, which makes a 10-foot by 10-foot wall adjacent to you within your reach, and your allies can choose to believe it to treat it as a solid, which allows you to climb onto it, etc. It's like how I choose to believe that I'm handsome. Sure, that makes it true, right? Creatures have to disbelieve it, otherwise they think it's real as well, which is pretty amazing for a composition cantrip. Like, it's something you just keep doing for free. It's just great. A Soothing Ballad at level 14 gives you a focus spell that's 2 actions, a range of 30 feet, and targets you and up to 9 allies. You get to choose whether you want to counteract fear effects on the targets, paralysis, or restore 7d8 hit points to said targets. And this increases by another 1d8 every rank. I love me a good healing spell. Effortless Concentration at 16th at the start of your turns for free action allows you to sustain one of your active bard spells. No need to worry about action economy anymore. And at level 20, you can gain the Fatal Aria Focus spell. For 1 action, you target 1 creature within 30 feet. If the target is 16th or lower level, they die instantly, no save. If they're 17th and have 50 hit points or fewer, they die instantly too, otherwise they drop to 0 and become dying 1. At 18th or higher, they take 50 damage, and if it brings them to 0 hit points, they die instantly. For 1 action and a focus point, that's pretty terrifying. I get that it's level 20, but there's no save for this, so you can literally just point at an enemy that's like level 18 plus and spend 3 focus points, and boom, 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 they just take 150 damage just straight up. With terrifying feats like that out of the way, let's go on to the last category for this class. What's it good at and what is it terrible at? So like I did with the fighter video, I created 5 different categories in which to rate the bard, and each category has 2 subcategories. I'll be ranking the bard out of 3 for each subcategory. Bear in mind this is from my experience with the class from a player and mostly GM's perspective, and it's more of a for fun section than a definitive one. I have removed the overall ranking out of 3 for each category since the fighter video, as I feel it's too broad of a thing to judge considering the subcategories. So first is offense, both melee and ranged. While bards can technically melee and are trained at martial weapons, they don't really do any extra damage like most martials do with certain attacks. For range, it's pretty much the same story, however their spells can deal some decent damage, especially from that range, but it's not much of a blaster caster. So for melee, I'm gonna go with 1 out of 3 violins smashed over your head. For range, it's 2 out of 3 violin sticks shot at you, though the latter is for spellcasting mostly. Onto defense, both personal and team. They're an 8 HP class with light armor, so not the squishiest, but not exactly tanky. As for team protection, they do get quite a lot of things to help their allies with things like Inspiring Resilience or Rallying Anthem, which gives everyone +1 to AC and save. So I'd say for personal, 1 out of 3 drum kits attached to your body, and for team, 2 out of 3 inspirational speeches. Next is support, buffing, and healing. Of course, the bard is the perfect support class, so buffing is immediately a 3 out of 3 battlefield anthems, and I think healing is probably going to be a 2 out of 3 songs that refuel your soul. And you only get that because they don't get the heal spell. Second to last category is control, split into crowd and debuffing. Now, bards are an occult caster, and that spell list has the best debuffs and damage over time abilities in the system. However, the spell slot limited. They cannot cast quite as many spells as the other full spellcasters. They do get some decent focus spells though that have some pretty debilitating effects, so I'm going to give it 2 out of 3 annoying earworms for crowd control, just because they're somewhat limited versus some other classes that can do stuff over and over again. Also, I think Arcane is probably a little bit better at crowd control than Occult is. For debuffs, on the other hand, they're an easy 3 out of 3 lyrics that make you question your life choices. Abilities such as Dirge of Doom is just unbelievably fantastic and is repeatable, with it being a composition cantrip. Lastly, utility, both magical and skill. Again, the Occult tradition does have a few utility spells, but not as many as Arcane, so I'm probably going to give this 2 out of 3 helpful tap dancers. And as for skills, if not for the polymath, we'd probably be on a 1 out of 3, but because of the polymath, we're going to give it a 2 out of 3 interpretive dancers. It's not quite as good as Rogue for how many skill increases it gets, but it's pretty decent at skills. Before we finish up, a simple question: how complex is the bard? Well, in my class complexity tier list, I rated the bard as B for balanced, which I pretty much stand by. For all of the casters in the system, it's not the most complex, as a lot of your turns are spent kind of doing things like composition cantrips, getting into position, etc., supporting protecting your allies. So yeah, they're kind of the perfect in-between. Not too complex for a caster, but definitely more complex than the average martial. And that is that, my detailed summary or class guide, if you are inclined, for the Bard. Hopefully I've shown you what the class is about, how it feels to play, potentially giving you some ideas for builds or even concepts. Despite it being a mostly support-oriented class, I actually find it to be one of the best classes designed in the entire system. I just find it really fun to play. Those composition cantrips can give a lot of variety to each and every one of your turns, especially as you level up, and there's always ways to reduce action costs, etc. Plus, it's quite hybrid in how you play it, so long as you circle back to support when needed. So you can do bits of healing, bits of damage, bits of debuffs, and even bits of martial stuff if you're the liver crazy person. I just like that the variety is there for this class. Thank you very much for watching this video chapter. If you'd like to support the Dominomicon, please check out the description for a link to my Coffee account or consider becoming a member. Taking a look at my Patreon, subscribing, liking, and commenting is incredibly helpful as well. I would like to thank my artist, Leandro Notado, and you can check the description for a link to his portfolio if you want some really awesome art made. I'd like to take a moment to thank my archivists and members, Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Nikola Milenkovic, Kyle Travis, Bent Fair, Apteryx 13, and patrons and archivists Clash Q and Patrick O'Donoghue. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominomicon, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.